Hi, my name's Calliope. I went into labor at my brother's wedding, surrounded by family, music, and catered smiles, but instead of helping me, my father dragged me by the hair out of the party. Not one person stopped him, not my mother, not my brother, because in their words, your brother's wedding matters more. 3 years later, I posted one photo, just one, and the whole lie unraveled. Why did they erase me from every family photo, every holiday, every plan? Why was I the one they needed to disappear? And if I hadn't kept the evidence, would anyone believe me? The laundry basket was on my left, half filled with tiny baby socks and soft cotton onesies I'd washed by hand that morning. I was folding them at the kitchen table, using the only space not already claimed by old mail and my mother's antique salt shaker collection. It was a quiet moment until my phone buzzed. It wasn't a message, not even a text, just a Facebook post. My brother Cassian had just gotten engaged. And the caption read, "She said yes," with a picture of him down on one knee and Zinnia, his longtime girlfriend, crying into her manicured hands. The post already had over 400 likes, heart emojis fluttering up and down the comment section. And just like that, I knew. No one had told me. I checked our family group chat. I wasn't in it. Again. I stared at the screen, then at the pile of baby socks, and felt something cold settle in my chest. I hadn't expected to be involved, not really, but the silence confirmed something deeper. I wasn't just out of the loop. I wasn't even on the radar. I texted my mom, Seraphine, a single line. "Congratulations?" It took her 4 hours to respond. When she did, it was short. "It just happened. Of course, we were going to tell you. Nothing more. No, we'd love to have you there. No, Cassian is excited. Not even a polite lie like, 'We hope to surprise you.' Just the usual clinical indifference." 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived. It was addressed to Mr. Mrs. Rhett Beaumont plus family. The typeface was elegant, all swirls and gold foil. I opened it slowly, my heart unsure whether to hope or brace. Inside was the wedding invitation. "Cassie and Zinnia invite you to celebrate their union." My name wasn't there. Not on the envelope, not on the inner card, not even mentioned in passing. I thought maybe it was an error, a printer glitch, something harmless. I called Zinnia to check. "You're still invited, right?" she said, casual and annoyed. "It's not like a name changes anything." I didn't answer right away. My hand drifted to the curve of my stomach. The baby kicked, maybe sensing my pulse shift. It wasn't about the name. It never was. It was about what the missing name represented, another erasure. I thought back to my college graduation. They'd made a family banner with all our names. Mine was misspelled, and Seraphine told me not to make a scene when I pointed it out. Then there was the wedding I never had. Michael, my fiancé, died in a car crash just weeks after we found out we were expecting. The engagement was quietly buried. The ring was boxed. My grief was private and unsupported. And now the pregnancy, tolerated but not celebrated. A shadow growing in a house where I was barely acknowledged. I didn't confront anyone. I'd learned not to. Instead, I folded the invitation and slipped it beneath the ultrasound photo pinned to my bedroom mirror. The baby, at least, had a face now, a profile, a spine, something real, something they couldn't ignore forever. At dinner that night, I tried once, just once, to bring it up. "Did you know I wasn't listed on the invitation?" I asked my father, Rhett, between bites of dry meatloaf. He didn't look up, didn't pause. "Don't make this about you." That was it. No follow-up, no explanation. Just the clink of his fork against the plate and the silence that wrapped around me like a coat of ash. The baby shifted inside me. I pressed a palm to my belly and smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I needed the child to feel something other than rejection. Later that night, I stood in my small room, the one with the creaky bed and the blinds that never closed right, and whispered to the bump below my ribs. "I guess we'll show up like shadows," I said. "Maybe that's all they'll let us be." I tucked the invitation into the drawer next to the bottle of prenatal vitamins and the baby's first onesie, the one I'd bought on sale the day after Michael's funeral. And in that moment, I felt something inside me shift. Not forgiveness, something else, something that would wait, but wouldn't stay silent forever. 3 weeks slid by in that strange way time does when you're too tired to care, but too hurt to forget. The air turned warmer. Cassian's face showed up more and more, on fridge magnets, on the local florist's window, even on a printed napkin that Seraphine kept proudly folded on the coffee table. I hadn't spoken about the invitation again, not to my father, not to my mother. The silence felt expected now, like part of the house's foundation. The day of the rehearsal dinner, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the hem of the beige maternity dress I'd picked out from the clearance rack. It clung a little more than I liked, but there was no hiding my belly anymore. Jordan, my doula, waited in the hallway, holding my overnight bag just in case. I glanced at her and offered a smile. She gave me one back, the kind that only women who've seen enough pain can give without saying a word. When we pulled into the vineyard driveway, the gravel crunched under the tires. I watched as guests in pastel linen strolled past the welcome sign with Cassian and Zinnia's names in cursive gold. We stepped inside the reception tent. I didn't even get a full 5 seconds before my mother spotted us. "Who's that with you?" Seraphine's voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean. "This is Jordan. She's just here in case I need—" "There's no space for—" "That," she said quickly, eyes flicking down to Jordan's name badge. "This isn't a hospital, Calliope." "She's not here to deliver the baby," I replied, my voice steady. "She's support." Seraphine leaned closer. "Support? You're not a war widow. It's a dinner rehearsal. Keep it simple." Then she turned away, whispering something into Zinnia's ear. Zinnia glanced at me, raised an eyebrow, and offered one of those tight, polite smiles that never reached her eyes. 10 minutes later, one of the event staff came over and told Jordan she'd need to wait in the parking lot. "I'm fine," I whispered to her as she hesitated. "You sure?" Jordan asked, not buying it. "No, but I'm not here to be comfortable," I said. Inside, the tables were set with gold-trimmed menus and rosemary sprigs. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. I sat alone at the end of a long table, no place card. No one pulled out my chair, no one noticed. Cassian gave a toast. "To family, our foundation." He smiled as if he meant it. Zinnia followed with a speech about gratitude and unity. I nodded in the right places, sipped flat ginger ale, and tried not to wince when the baby pressed against my ribs. As the applause faded, I drifted, back to a night a year ago. We were at the kitchen table, just me and Seraphine. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air. She looked at me across the salt and pepper shakers and said it straight. "You should consider not keeping it." I blinked, thinking I misheard. "There's still time," she added, like this was a dentist appointment I could reschedule. I had whispered, "But it's all I have left." And her reply came with a sip of wine and no pause at all. And that's exactly the problem. I came back to the present just as the slideshow started. Childhood photos flickered on the white screen. Cassian's first bike ride, Zinnia blowing out candles, the two of them on a beach trip with our parents. I waited. Finally, one photo of me appeared. I was 6, holding a kite. It lasted 3 seconds. No one noticed when I stood up. The linen brushed against my knees as I left the table. Outside, the vineyard smelled like cut grass and champagne. Jordan was leaning against the car, arms crossed. "I'm fine," I lied again. She looked at me without speaking. "You sure they want you here?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "I'm not sure I care anymore." We sat in the car until the music inside shifted from instrumental jazz to something more celebratory. The clinking of glass told me Zinnia's father was starting his speech. "Let's go," I said. Jordan drove in silence. The road back home wound through quiet neighborhoods and dim street lights. The baby moved again. I placed a hand on my stomach and exhaled slowly. As we pulled into the driveway, I turned to her. "Would it be selfish to walk out of my own brother's wedding?" She looked at me, honest and steady. "No," she said, "but it'd be brave to stay, only to show them what they chose to forget." The morning of the wedding crept in quietly, with a sky too blue and a silence too heavy for what was supposed to be a celebration. By 10, I was already sweating through the lining of my dress, and by noon, the vineyard grounds were humming with the sounds of floral arrangements being adjusted, champagne flutes clinking, and Zinnia barking last-minute directions at the event coordinator like she was directing a live taping. I arrived alone. Jordan had offered to come, to sit in the car nearby just in case, but I told her no. This was something I had to walk through myself. One more corridor of indifference, one more display of polished dysfunction. My dress, a pale cream cotton blend, clung to me in the heat and emphasized what the room already seemed to wish they didn't have to look at. Me, or more specifically, the undeniable shape of me. The guests floated around the ceremony area like they belonged in a catalog. Pastel skirts, khakis ironed sharp, ties matched to floral lapels. I scanned for a seat. No usher, no reserved card, just open space. I settled toward the back, on the far left, next to a stone planter with wilting lavender. From where I sat, I could see everything but felt part of none of it. And then my father appeared. He didn't greet me. He didn't even slow his pace. He leaned in as he passed and hissed, "You're in every shot. Stop making this about you." He didn't wait for a reply, just kept walking. I swallowed the instinct to respond. My hands folded tightly over my stomach, my nails digging into the soft flesh of my palm. The baby shifted again, a gentle thump just beneath my ribs. I whispered quietly, "I'm not trying to be seen. I'm just here." The ceremony began. Chairs rustled. Music swelled. Zinnia floated down the aisle like she was made of silk and applause. Cassian stood beaming at the end, a practiced smile resting easily on his face. He looked proud, untouched. I tried to focus on the vows, on anything else, but my body betrayed me. At first, it was subtle. A warmth, then a pressure that stole my breath. I adjusted slightly, then froze. A slow, unmistakable wetness was blooming beneath me. I knew the signs. I knew what was happening. Not yet. Please, not now. I turned my face downward, pretending to reach into my bag. I shifted to the side, legs clenched, praying it wasn't noticeable. Cassian, noticing the movement, excused himself during the interlude before the rings. He crouched beside me, his expression careful, not concerned, not panicked, just cautious. "It's happening, isn't it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded. My jaw trembled, not from pain, but from shame. Shame I hadn't earned. He reached over to a nearby table and snatched a cloth napkin, slipping it under me with the skill of someone trained in damage control. "This is Zinnia's moment," he said softly. "Don't ruin it." That line didn't land like a blow. It landed like a stamp, official, permanent, final. I stood up slowly, the cloth clinging. No one watched. Or if they did, they quickly pretended they didn't. With my shoes in hand, I walked out, past the chairs, past the arbor adorned with white roses, past my own father's back as he turned slightly to avoid acknowledging me. At the edge of the ceremony, the gravel gave way to a narrow garden path. The sunlight seemed brighter out there, the quiet more honest. I leaned against a brick column at the entrance and exhaled. I could hear music starting again, laughter rising as the officiant made some charming joke about forever. My forever had already started, and it didn't include a white dress or coordinated seating or family blessings. It included a child who hadn't even arrived yet, but who I already understood more deeply than anyone sitting behind me ever could. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered to myself, I don't want to be angry. I just don't want to disappear anymore. But deep inside, I felt something shift. Not in my body, not in the tight pull of another contraction, but in the way I saw them now. Not through the lens of a child hoping to be included, but as a woman recognizing that she never really was. By the time the officiant declared Cassian and Zinnia husband and wife, I was already off the lawn and out of view. A staff member escorted me to the bridal prep room, the one they used for hair touch-ups and dress changes, the one I wasn't supposed to be in unless someone needed something cleaned up. They didn't say it out loud, but the way the assistant avoided eye contact when she handed me the key said enough. I was a disruption, a stain they had to quietly remove from the frame. I waited inside, alone, while the reception music swelled through the walls, string versions of pop songs from decades ago, the kind meant to sound timeless. I sat on the bench and tried to focus on my breathing. Jordan wasn't here. I'd told her not to come. Again. Some part of me still wanted to prove I could get through this without help. About 20 minutes later, another staffer knocked softly and peeked in. They said you can come in now, she said. Guests are seated. You'll be at table 11. I nodded, stood up slowly, and took a deep breath. The dress they left for me hung on a portable rack, cream-colored, satin where it hadn't yellowed, with lace sleeves and a half-broken zipper. Zinnia's old reception dress. Seraphine had called it perfect for your shape. Elegant, not loud. The fabric tugged awkwardly across my belly. I struggled to zip it until I gave up and covered the back with a shawl. The hem was unraveling on one side. I stepped into a pair of flats and faced the mirror. I looked like someone wearing someone else's life. The mirror didn't lie. I walked back toward the tent, arms wrapped around myself to hide the open zipper. The reception was already underway. Glasses clinked, and the servers were moving like dancers, plates balanced on one hand, trays gliding like choreography. Before I reached the tent entrance, Seraphine intercepted me. She didn't look at my face, only at my armpits. "You're glistening," she said, handing me a napkin. It was monogrammed, white, thick, with gold lettering. Cassian Zinnia, forever begins. Wipe under your arms before someone sees. That was it. No, how are you? No, you made it. Just a correction. I took the napkin and wiped like she asked. Not because I agreed, but because the moment wasn't about me, and I was reminded of that with every breath. When I finally reached table 11, it was next to the server's entrance, near the swinging kitchen door. The air smelled like reheated potatoes and melted butter. There was no name card, just a folded placeholder that read guest. I sat down. A few moments later, a server brought me sparkling cider without asking. I hadn't requested it. It was clear no one thought I'd be drinking anything else. Across the table, a woman I didn't recognize leaned toward another and whispered, "She's glowing, right? Pregnancy suits her." I almost laughed. I didn't, but almost. I sipped the cider. It tasted like carbonated apologies. Up front, Zinnia and Cassian were making the rounds. Her dress fit her like it had been sewn on minutes before. Every hair, every movement curated for cameras. He looked relaxed, like he wasn't carrying anything he didn't choose. They stopped near my table. Cassian gave me a quick glance and said, "Glad you're feeling better." Zinnia didn't speak. Just smiled, thin and tight, and took his hand again as they moved on. I leaned back slightly, folding the napkin on my lap, fingers tracing the letters like they were braille. I could feel the heat climbing from my neck, not from shame, not even from anger, from clarity. The baby shifted again, gently now. I breathed in deep, then out, and for a moment, everything stilled. The erasure hadn't been subtle. The dress wasn't mine. The seat wasn't mine. The moment wasn't mine. But the silence? That belonged to me. They didn't forget me. They chose not to see me. That's worse. They saw the belly. They saw the shoes I changed into halfway through the night. They saw the discomfort. They just didn't care. And suddenly, I knew something I hadn't dared admit before. Not even to myself. I wasn't the problem. They were. I pressed the napkin flat on my thighs, smoothing the folds, and whispered so low only I could hear it. One more thing, just one, and I'll show them who they've been trying to forget. By the time dessert plates were cleared and the best man took the microphone, my lower back felt like it was being pulled apart with piano wire. I shifted in my seat, hoping to ease the ache, pretending to adjust the shawl that covered my dress's busted zipper. Across the room, the crowd laughed politely at a joke about Cassian's teenage haircuts. I smiled, too. Not because I found it funny, but because the alternative was letting the pain show. I excused myself quietly, pushing away from the table and making my way around the edge of the reception tent, past the bar where guests were ordering signature cocktails with names like Zinnia's Kiss and Cassian's Promise. I didn't speak to anyone. No one stopped me. I passed the kitchen entrance and slipped behind a hedge near the portable restrooms. That's where it really hit. The first contraction, not Braxton Hicks, not a cramp, a real one. Deep, low, steady, and unapologetic. I gripped the back of a bench and inhaled sharply. My watch buzzed from a calendar notification, an ironic reminder to hydrate. I ignored it and focused on the tension unwinding through my abdomen. 54 seconds. When it passed, I pulled out my phone and texted my mother. "It's happening. I think I need help." No response. I waited. A full minute. Then I tried her phone. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I tried my father. He answered. "It's me," I said, breath short. "Dad, I'm in labor. I need help." His voice was flat, annoyed. "Figure it out quietly. Your brother's best man is mid-speech." And then, click, he hung up. My hands trembled. I knew better than to expect warmth, but I hadn't expected that. No time left. I called 911. 10 minutes later, the ambulance pulled into the driveway, its lights dimmed per protocol, but it never made it to me. Because my father was already outside, arms folded at the gravel turnaround, standing like a statue of decency blocking the present from reaching the truth. "We didn't call you," he told the paramedic nearest him. The EMT tried to explain that someone had. "She's my daughter. We've got it handled," he added. I was inside a wine hallway that cut behind the main building, huddled near crates of rosé, one hand braced against the stone wall as another contraction came on like a wave that refused to pull back. A young server, barely out of high school, rounded the corner with a tray of empty flutes and stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me crouched there. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "No," I managed. Can you find the medics? I called them, but she nodded and ran. Minutes later, the EMTs made it through. One of them knelt beside me, started checking vitals, while another radioed for clearance to transport. Just as they were lifting me onto the stretcher, my phone buzzed again. A voice message. Zinnia. I hesitated. I should have ignored it, but I played it anyway. The speaker pressed to my chest so only I could hear. You really need to stay offline, Calliope, her voice said, laced with that syrupy tone she used when she thought she sounded professional. If you start posting pictures of your baby, we'll have to say he's adopted. I won't have my brand look messy. This day is about Cassian and me, not you and your drama. That was the moment. Not the contraction that knocked the wind out of me, not my father's refusal to let the ambulance in, not the napkin or the dress or even the missing place card. That voice, that message, that lie before it was even told. They don't want you in their photos, I whispered to myself as the doors of the ambulance swung closed. My hands clutched the side rail as the vehicle began to move. The city lights blurred outside. The pain pulsed, but my mind was sharper than ever. They didn't want me to exist, because they didn't want the truth to exist. Well, I was done being quiet. Get me out of here, I told the EMT beside me. I'm done. He nodded, no questions asked. As the siren finally clicked on, belated but necessary, I turned toward the window, resting my hand on my belly. Another contraction began to build. I leaned down, whispered into the space between my chest and the child inside it. They don't want you in their photos. Fine. I'll give them something they can't crop out. The headlights came fast, carving into the vineyard's narrow road, bouncing off the stone pillars at the edge of the gravel circle. I couldn't move. The cold had sunk into my skin, but I was too far gone in pain and humiliation to feel it anymore. When the car stopped, a woman jumped out, dark coat flaring, hair tied back in a quick bun. She knelt next to me without asking a thing. Are you okay? Are you in labor? I nodded. That was all I could do. I didn't even have the strength to cry. Please don't leave me here, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly, already lifting my arm over her shoulder, helping me stand. I'm Lorraine. I'm a nurse. I was just off shift when I saw him dragging you. She didn't say your father. She didn't ask what I did to deserve it. She just saw me, really saw me, and that was enough. Together, we hobbled to her car. It smelled like antiseptic and mint gum. She blasted the heat as soon as we were inside and tucked her coat around my legs while dialing the hospital. Her voice was calm, controlled, the opposite of everything I felt. My name is Lorraine Alvarez. I'm bringing in a woman in active labor, late third trimester, early contractions, domestic trauma on site. Yes, she's stable. No, she hasn't delivered yet. We'll be there in 15. I rested my forehead against the window. Back at the venue, the lights were still glowing. People were still dancing. No one came out, not even to check. It all started 10 minutes earlier, right before the cake cutting. I'd been standing behind the catering tent, trying to manage the contractions on my own. I was sweating through Zinnia's old dress, the one Seraphine insisted I wear because it was just fine for someone in my condition. I'd barely breathed through the last wave when I felt a distinct pop inside, followed by warmth down my legs, not gentle, not gradual. My water had broken. I stumbled forward, trying to get someone's attention, a waiter, a cousin, anyone. But before I could call out, Seraphine saw me and gasped loud enough to turn heads. Rhett appeared beside her instantly, his jaw clenched. Get out, he said. I need help, I gasped. You're not ruining this night. I took one shaky step back. That was enough. He grabbed my arm. I tried to pull away, so he grabbed my hair. There was a beat, a single moment, where everything froze. I remember a few people gasping. I saw a phone lift. Zinnia turned her face. Cassian didn't move. And then he dragged me, across the gravel, past the lights, down the path that led to the guest parking. My knees scraped. My breath caught. I screamed. I begged. I don't remember the words. I just remember the sound. Desperate. Raw. He stopped at the edge of the property and yanked the door open. Cold air punched me in the chest. You already wrecked your life. Don't wreck his, he spat. I collapsed onto the cement. Seraphine stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You've always been dramatic, she said. Then she shut the door. That was it. No one followed. No one called my name. What broke inside me wasn't just physical. It was deeper, a fracture between what I thought family meant and what it actually was. Lorraine's car pulled into the emergency bay with the urgency I'd begged for hours earlier. The ER staff helped me into a wheelchair. Lorraine stayed with me through the paperwork. She answered the nurses' questions when I couldn't. She waited outside triage while they hooked me to monitors. 12 hours later, my son was born. No one sent flowers. No one asked his name. They didn't know. I didn't tell them. I named him Chance, because that's what I'd been denied. What he now had, what I refused to let them take from me again. As I held him, bundled and breathing against my chest, I didn't think about the dragging or the silence or the cake I never got to taste. I thought about the way his fingers curled around mine, the way his eyes opened, not crying, not yet, just looking, like he already knew everything, like he had chosen to come into the world exactly when he did, not during the toast, not during the bouquet toss, but right after. Right when the applause had finally stopped. Lorraine didn't say much on the drive to the hospital. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was louder than anything anyone in my family had ever offered. I clutched the side of her car door with one hand and her sweater sleeve with the other, sweat rolling down my temple as another contraction gripped me. You're doing great, she said, her voice steady as we turned into the ER drop-off lane. They'll take care of you from here, but I'm not going far. That wasn't something people said to me, not anymore. Within 2 hours, Chance was born. Quiet, pink, alive. No one from my family called. Not a single flower. No how's the baby? Or is she okay? I didn't expect it, but some tiny, traitorous part of me had still hoped. Lorraine visited every morning during my 3-day stay. She brought a little plastic container of grapes on the first day. On the second, she handed me a sweater that smelled like cinnamon dryer sheets. On the third, she stood in the corner while the nurse helped me into my coat and didn't ask any questions I wasn't ready to answer. I held Chance tightly that last night in the hospital. His tiny hands, still wrinkled from the womb, rested near his cheeks. He slept soundly. I didn't. The silence in the room was thick, but it wasn't terrifying. It was clean. Mine. The day after we were discharged, Lorraine dropped us off at a women's shelter just outside the city. It's not fancy, she'd warned me, but it's safe and quiet. That was all I needed. Safe, quiet, and a place where I didn't have to answer for being someone's disappointment. 3 days later, the video leaked. I didn't know who posted it, maybe a guest with a grudge or a server who saw too much. But suddenly, it was everywhere, on Instagram Reels, TikTok reposts, Facebook groups for wedding fails. Grainy but clear, a heavily pregnant woman being dragged by her hair across gravel while music played faintly in the background. Me. The caption read, "Bride's sister causes scene at wedding." The comments were brutal. Why didn't she just leave like a normal person? That poor dad. trying to keep things classy, and his pregnant daughter shows up like a soap opera. Can't choose family, huh? And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, my phone buzzed. A message from Zinnia. You humiliated all of us. Then another from Seraphine. We took you in when no one else would. This is how you repay us? No question about the baby, no apology, no accountability, just blame. Always blame. I wanted to scream. I wanted to send back that video. I wanted to forward them every comment that called him abusive and me brave. But I didn't. I just turned my phone off and set it face down on the nightstand beside the cot. That evening, one of the younger women at the shelter knocked on my bunk rail. There's someone asking for you, she whispered. She said her name is Amani? I walked slowly to the front, where Lorraine stood beside a woman in her mid-20s, black hair and braids, hands shoved into the pockets of her hoodie. Hi, the girl said, eyes flicking to Lorraine, then back to me. You probably don't remember me. I worked the wedding. Catering team. I nodded, unsure where this was going. I recorded something, she said, pulling out her phone. Didn't mean to, just had my voice memo running 'cause I was trying to catch the DJ playlist. But I got this. She hit play. The sound was muffled at first, background chatter and clinking glass. Then Rhett's voice, clear as day. After tonight, she's out. I don't want to see her face again. Zinnia chimed in. We'll spin it. Say she wanted distance. Make it seem like she just drifted off. Let them believe it was her choice. Then laughter. Not much, just enough. I didn't realize I was gripping the edge of the reception desk until Lorraine gently touched my shoulder. You don't have to listen to the rest, Amani said. No, I said. I need to. She emailed me the file. After they left, I sat back on the thin mattress with Chance asleep against my chest. The hum of the overhead light buzzed faintly. The hallway smelled like bleach and something sweet from the soup they served that night. I opened my phone, created a new folder, and titled it Evidence. Then I began to type. Every message, every voicemail, every look, every time they'd tried to erase me, only to act shocked when I went quiet. Lorraine stopped by the next day, same as always. This time she brought diapers, a pair of socks for Chance, and a small bottle of grape juice. She sat next to me without saying much, just looked at the baby, then at me. You don't owe them silence anymore, she finally said. That night, for the first time since I left the hospital, I smiled. Not because I was healed, not because I was safe, but because someone finally believed me and didn't ask me to be smaller to deserve it. Yeah, I think we've earned it. That's what I told Chance as I buckled him into the booster seat. He kicked his little legs in rhythm with a tune only he knew. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sun was strong enough to warm the car through the glass, but not so hot we needed the AC. The silence was a good one, the kind that lets you breathe. 3 years had passed since that night at the vineyard. 3 years of building a life that didn't involve apology or explanation. 3 years of raising a boy who laughed with his whole face. 3 years of keeping every text, every voicemail, every photo, every receipt in a folder marked later. It turns out later was today. I posted the picture on a quiet afternoon. Chance and I had been running errands. We passed the old event venue on the way home, and he asked, Mama, was that the place where they said we couldn't come inside? I told him, that's where we were uninvited before we arrived. So we stopped. There was a faded backdrop still bolted to the back fence, vines now crawling over it, the same cursive gold letters, Cassie and Zinnia, Forever Begins. Chance stood in front of it, holding my hand. I set the phone on a ledge, hit the timer, and we both looked straight into the lens. No smiles. Just stillness. I posted the photo that night. No filters, no tags. The caption was only 5 words. Was I ever part of it? I didn't expect what came next. The post went viral within hours. First the local page, then the national ones. Screenshots flooded my inbox. I muted the comments, turned off DMs, but still, I saw enough to know the tide had turned. Who lets a pregnant woman get dragged like that? Where was the brother during all this? I'd never forgive this. Ever. Then came the message from Cassian. Wow, still trying to look like a saint. You've always had a victim complex. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it, not because it stung, because it proved he was still watching. Then Seraphine emailed. The tone was formal, too formal, like a stranger trying to rent an Airbnb. We're selling the house. Your birth certificate is framed in the study. The buyer would like to preserve certain family artifacts. It would mean a lot if you came by to sign something for the record. No apology, no mention of chance. Just a polite request for one last clean picture. I thought about ignoring it, but instead I packed a bag for Chance, dropped him off with Lorraine, and drove alone. When I pulled up to the old house, it looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, emotionally. The porch seemed less intimidating, the garden less impressive, the house didn't shrink. I had grown. Inside, the air was thick with wood polish and unspoken tension. Rhett sat in his old recliner, hands folded. Zinnia stood by the kitchen island, typing something on her phone. Seraphine met me in the foyer like I was a client, not her daughter. We didn't think you'd actually come, she said. I didn't answer. Cassian emerged from the hallway, smile too tight. Hey, Cal, he said, like we were siblings in a sitcom and not survivors of different wars. I didn't answer him either. Seraphine led me to the study, the same study where she used to tell me not to raise my voice, where I was once grounded for talking back, where the family's life was arranged in tidy, curated frames on walnut bookshelves. There, in the middle of the wall, was my birth certificate, framed like a trophy. Thought you'd want to take it, Seraphine said. The buyer's interested in maintaining legacy. I stepped forward, took the frame down, opened the back, and slid the certificate out. Then, from my tote bag, I pulled a different photo, the one of me being dragged across the gravel. My face pale, my dress soaked, my hair clenched in a man's fist. I slid it into the frame, hung it back up, turned around. Seraphine looked like she'd been slapped. Why would you do that? She whispered. I straightened my posture. My voice didn't shake. Because silence is the loudest thing you'll ever hear. Then I walked out. Outside, Chance waited in Lorraine's car, humming as he colored with a crayon from her purse. I climbed into the passenger seat. Mama, he said, looking up, can we get ice cream now? I smiled. Yeah, I said. I think we've earned it. We sat on the curb outside the ice cream shop, cones in hand, the sun dipping low behind the grocery store across the street. Chance had picked strawberry, again, and had a pink smear above his lip. I didn't mention it. Some messes aren't meant to be cleaned up too quickly. He was quiet as he licked his cone, occasionally humming to himself. I watched him, thinking how strange it was that I'd once begged people to acknowledge him. Now he was the only voice in my life I never doubted. Later that evening, after bedtime books and too many tickles, he curled into his blanket and I sat by his bed, watching the fan spin shadows on the ceiling. It was the kind of night where nothing felt urgent, yet everything felt important. The next morning, Lorraine stopped by. She knocked once before letting herself in, as she always did. In her hands was an old shoebox wrapped in a faded towel. I was going through some things, she said. Found this at the bottom of the shelter's donation bin. I recognized the handwriting. I took the box to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a letter, yellowed, folded with corners softened from time. The envelope read, in cursive, I knew instantly, for Calliope. Only her. My grandmother's handwriting. My chest tightened before I even read the first word. My sweet girl, if you're reading this, something's gone very wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but if this ever finds you, then maybe you're sitting in silence, wondering why it always felt like you had to ask for permission to exist. I saw how they treated you. You were never invisible to me. You are a mirror of everything they couldn't handle in themselves. Bravery, honesty, vulnerability. Don't let them rewrite you. You're not the story they tried to tell. You never were. Love, Grandma Eleanor. My hands shook, not from pain, not even from anger. Just release. The letter didn't make anything okay. It didn't undo the dragging, the erasure, the silence, but it reminded me I hadn't imagined it. That someone had loved me enough to put words to paper when no one else would speak them aloud. I tucked the letter into my journal, not hidden, just protected. That weekend, while picking up groceries at the corner store, I turned into the cereal aisle and nearly bumped carts with someone coming the other way. Imani, she looked older, just a bit. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a navy polo with a badge for a local nonprofit. Calliope? She asked. I smiled. Hey. We stood awkwardly beside the bran flakes for a moment before I said, Thank you, again, for the recording, for believing me. You were right, she said, her voice soft but sure. I saw everything. You weren't wrong. You were just too real for them. We hugged. Quick, no drama. Then she grabbed a box of granola bars and moved along. I watched her go, my hand tightening around the bananas in my cart. I didn't cry, but something loosened in my chest that hadn't in years. Later that night, after Chance fell asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around the room. It wasn't big. The paint was chipped. The closet door never shut properly. But it was ours, and it was safe. I thought of the house I'd grown up in, still standing, still full of framed moments meant to be seen. But now, in the middle of that wall, hung something they couldn't gloss over. They could try to take it down. They could repaint, renovate, redecorate. But they'd always know it had been there, that somewhere beneath the surface, the truth had left its mark. Chance stirred, rolled over, mumbled something in his sleep. I walked over, tucked the blanket around him tighter. Mama, he murmured without opening his eyes, why don't we ever go to Grandpa's? I kissed his forehead and sat beside him. Because some houses, I whispered, don't have room for the truth. He didn't ask again, and I didn't offer more. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere, leaves rustled against the side of the building. A dog barked in the distance. Familiar, ordinary. There would always be a wall in that house, with my photo on it. Even if they sold the place, even if they scraped the paint and replaced the frames. Some things live in the drywall. Some memories cling to silence. I wasn't erased. I was just waiting to be remembered by the right people.